Welcome to episode 10 of Education, a Clusterfuck in Need of Repair. Episode 10, Voices from the Field. Before we start, I'd like to emphasize that all ideas presented in this podcast are my own and do not reflect the thoughts, opinions, or positions of my employer, Emerson College, its programs, or its representatives.
It's trusting that I am the expert in the room, and that is huge.
It warms the energy that we were talking about around the room, and I've been grateful for that. We're all people having a conversation, and those moments add up.
Welcome to episode 10 of Education, a Clusterfuck in Need of Repair. This episode, Voices from the Field, is the second in a 3-episode sequence on school-based leadership. Principals, assistant principals, department heads, etc. A slight detour. Oh my God, you are out of control, I hear you cry. Yeah, I like them detours. Anyway, as someone who loves teaching and learning, I've been very lucky in my life to get to work with, talk to, and be around teachers and learners for the past 43 years. 43 years, that'll blow your mind. Truly, I could not have asked for more. And to add to that, when I decided to start a podcast, my biggest supporters were the teachers I've known. And when I asked them if they'd be willing to be interviewed, they agreed enthusiastically. Like I said, lucky. Unfucking believable. In this episode, 2 teachers, Alec Kealing and Amy Czarnowski Rawlins, with nearly 50 years of experience between them, talk about the different types of administrators they've worked with and for. Alec offers a really cool structure for considering 4 types of administrators, a structure based in practical teaching experience rather than management theory. Having listened to Alec lay it out, it was impossible not to have various administrators in my life click into the various slots he laid out. Even 1 or 2 type Ds, sadly. Listen to the episode and you'll know what that means. Okay, that was cheap, like a movie trailer. I am a little ashamed for having done that. But I'm leaving it in. What the fuck is a good interview? Amy offers specific examples and stories from her work in a variety of systems, from the good to the very bad, and considers their impact on the community of the schools. Her final story will make you consider moving to Decula, Georgia. It's the Shangri-La of administrative support. On a bad day, I just listen to that chunk of the recording over and over and over. Anyway, enjoy these voices from the field. At the salon, which was episode 8, we had a few minutes at the end of the official salon where some teachers agreed to stay and talk about their experience with school leadership, in school leadership. And my guest today, Alec Kealing, had this really fascinating take on different types of administrators. And I asked him if he would be willing to come and be interviewed, and he agreed, and here he is. So I'd like to introduce, regretting every moment of that choice, I'm sure. I'd like to introduce Alec Kealing. He's a teacher in Waltham, the Waltham Public Schools. I've known him for 26 years, something like that. And we both look exactly the same, though, so that's good. And I asked him to come and talk about the nature of school leadership and its impact on schools. So here we go. Welcome.
Thank you.
How long have you taught in Waltham?
So I am in the middle of year 25 now.
Wow. Okay. Wow. During that time, how many administrators have you experienced? And you can either go with principals or you can include principals, assistant principals, and department heads.
So I was really intrigued by this question because I served as an itinerant for many years before working at only one building, and that has to do with numbers. And for listeners who might not be familiar with the term, an itinerant is someone who travels between buildings and might do 4 classes in one school and 12 classes in another, etc. So keeping in mind that there were years that I traveled, I decided it was easiest to do it by base school. And in my base school, where I am full-time at the moment, I've had 4 principals, 5 assistant principals. One of those assistants rose into the principal's seat at one point. I've had 4 assistant superintendents of curriculum, 2 assistant superintendents of pupil services, 5 assistant superintendents of HR, 4 department heads, and 10 superintendents during that time.
Oh my God!
Yes.
Now, if I were of a, political nature, which of course I'm not, I could make a comment about that many superintendents in 25 years, but I'm not going to.
No, there's so much to say, and it's not going to be said.
It's not going to be said. Wow. Of those roles, which ones did you interact the most with?
So I spend the bulk of my time interacting with principals, assistant principals, and department heads over the years.
Wow. I'd say that's a pretty far-reaching experience with a lot of different kinds of administrators. You talked after the salon, you talked about the four basic types of administrators. Can you talk about that again? It was fascinating to me.
Yes. So the 4 types that I feel are the archetypes. The first is, I get what you do. As an arts teacher, I get what you do and I support you in doing it. And then the next one is, I don't get what you do, but I support you as a professional in doing it. Nice. And if you're lucky, there might be a bubble there where they say, and I'm going to learn about what you do. And you get to teach. So sometimes that's a benefit.
That's a big benefit.
Number 3 is, I don't know what you do. I'm not totally sure what anyone else does. I look great in this chair, and we should do it this way because I'm an administrator. And then type number 4 is, I'm here to save you. I'm here to save you and help you do it better because I'm an administrator.
As you say this, I'm flashing through administrators I've had both in the public schools when I taught in public schools, in private schools when I taught in private schools, and at the college and university level. And all 4 of those I could put names to. Wow. Okay. Can you talk about what some of the benefits and drawbacks of each type are? In one case, it's kind of obvious, but the others, they have every leadership style, for me, has benefits and has drawbacks. Can you talk about them?
I can, and I think one of the positives of having been an itinerant especially is you kind of get to see where the archetypes can branch out, and in some cases work like a Venn diagram where they can overlap each other. The benefits of the first one are pretty obvious. You feel seen. You are usually trusted. And you're often empowered to make decisions about what you're doing because the person who's there, they get it. They know what, and they're there for support, usually for help, and occasionally there's a question to be answered, and that's it. It's a very smooth, easy way to work as an arts teacher. Sometimes there's a drawback there because the administrator does understand your job, perhaps at one point had your position, and that means if there is a difference of opinion, you are probably not in a position to argue why you're the expert, and you may have to say, okay, we're going to go here because you are the boss and you know what this program is. I don't see that often, but it is occasionally creeped in.
I'll actually give an example from, I was working in Chelsea, and the woman that I was working with, Amy Czarnowski, I went to her and said, I want to do this research project. And she went to the principal, who was type 1, and he, on the strength of a handshake, he said, come into my school and do this project. I couldn't believe it. And the downside actually became that he was so accommodating for the teachers and trusted the teachers that upper administration said to him, why are you trusting them so much? And he ended up getting booted out of the job.
Because extremely upper management worried there wasn't enough of a thumb.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes, I'm sadly familiar with that too.
Yes. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
The second type, I don't understand your position. I happen to teach drama. I don't understand your position as a drama teacher because it is not as common as some of the other specialists are. But I support you as a professional, and I trust that what you're doing goes along with what you're supposed to be doing. I've had wonderful times working with that archetype because it's not about being in the position of the expert. It's about feeling like we have a natural way to get to know each other. Because I'd love for you to see this project, or I'd love for you to see the process that went in, or, I recognize there might be a challenge in another room for this particular student. In this room, something that's a benefit is this, and you find yourself almost bonding. Do I get to say the bonding word, the P word?
Oh, there's nothing more relational than working in schools. I'm sorry, it's everybody's kicking as hard as they can, and if you're lucky, you're all stroking in the same direction, not in different directions. But
no,
yeah.
Agreed. And that has opened it up some wonderful opportunities to get to know administrators that I might not have done because they were working hard to learn what this position was, and I was working hard in the best sense of the word to say, here's what we do, here's how it's helpful, here's why it's valuable.
Can I say something about
please.
that? You are an excellent communicator. That's one of the things that characterizes you as a person and a teacher. And I can imagine you being more capable than some other people that I've known to reach out to that person and say, here, come in and learn, watch me, and let me show you what I'm doing, because you're confident in what you know, what you're able to do. Where some people hesitate to do that because they're afraid that they'll be seen as incompetent and it will draw attention, and that would be bad.
Well, and I appreciate that very much. 25 years in, I have the benefit of some a learning curve behind me, and in the beginning, I would have been one of those people like, well, please don't come in because I don't want you to know that I'm still getting my footing here. So working with Type B has been significantly easier, I would say, after my first 5 to 7 years in teaching.
Yeah,
and that timeline made a big difference.
Yep.
The drawback there is, for me, it's only if the personalities don't necessarily click. And I don't mean we have to be besties and do each other's hair and talk about American Idol. I mean, if we can't, as educator and administrator together, if we're not necessarily invested with each other, it kind of throws water on that idea of come learn what I do, and no matter how good a communicator you are, if there isn't a genuine interest there, you're going to divide off, and you end up in a situation where you're really not getting any feedback.
Yeah.
That's a little bit harder.
I would agree. Yep.
The third type, it's not so much that I want to say there aren't benefits. I simply haven't discovered the benefits of this type yet. This is, if I'm being personal about it, that's the most difficult for me, because communication skills are not, if there's nowhere to communicate,
yes,
you can't do anything with that. The bigger piece for me, and this could probably be a whole nother podcast, but the idea of the teacher evaluation, there is so much required these days.
It's shocking.
It is. And underneath it all, if you truly don't have an understanding of what the teacher does, I don't know how you effectively evaluate it. And that, for me, is the practical stumbling block of that archetype. Now, I have experienced it where it can kind of go on two paths. And I'm not splitting an archetype. I'm saying that if you know you're working with this archetype, you kind of have two roads. You can keep your head down and skirt an ego, and every time you're involved with that person, be pleasant, be professional. That's probably good advice anywhere, any archetype you're working with. Yeah. But you make sure that what you do is solid, and the decisions you make you can back up, and you try to go about your day. Occasionally, I have found that the person in that seat, fitting that archetype, actually has a real human side to them that they are blocking because they don't want anybody to know that they don't totally understand, or that they themselves might be adjusting to their role within administration. And if you can find that, I feel like sometimes you can kind of help that person move into I don't understand, but I support, and eventually into I get this. But there's a time frame there, and patience is a virtue, and it's not one of mine. So that's a little harder.
Well, as we've moved in public schools to increasing numbers of administrators who have never been teachers, like that move from college to grad school where you take principal training, it's not called that, of course, and then you're a principal of a school, is tricky because as a teacher, you often know more, not just about what you're doing. This is what I do day to day, but how that fits as part of the model of the school, how that works as part of the system of education in the school system you're working in. Sometimes you know more about that than the person who's been hired to lead the school, and it's very tricky because you can't say that to them. Follow me, I know more. It's a very unpopular messaging.
Just sit and watch and learn.
Right.
That is actually, if I were ever to create an AI administrator to bring into buildings, having teaching experience to me is top of the list. And I don't even think it necessarily has to be at that same grade level. But I think an understanding of how all the pieces of a school building work is a really big deal when you are at the front of the ship trying to get us all to row in the same direction.
Yes.
So, well, the final archetype that I'm here to save you because I'm administrator, that can be a really mixed bag. If someone genuinely wants to come in and stop and say, what do you need saved from? What's not going well? That's amazing, and thank you so much, because we could use help in this area, or we could use support with this part of the budget, or we have been doing this cross-section of performances and we feel that it's no longer fitting the population we have. Someone who genuinely wants your opinion on what needs fixed, that can be amazing. I have struggled if it is someone who just knows from the outset what we need saved from, and maybe that's not actually what we need saved from at all. Let's not get rid of what's working in the interest of starting fresh and starting over. I understand sometimes you have to set the field on fire to replant, but this isn't a field. These are people.
These are tiny humans, guided by big humans.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just, there's always, I'm always biting my thumbnail when that person arrives newly. Typically it works out. Typically you learn how to work, and the administrator is as much of an observer as they are push themselves in. Sometimes that balance takes a little bit longer to catch. If you're really lucky, you're part of a department, which I am, and the department can work and say, we wanted to make sure you were aware of the following. And there's enough openness and self-awareness for an administrator to hear that. If it goes well, that person can definitely morph into a B or an A, right, on the list. If it doesn't go well, we run the risk of morphing into a C and a real engagement with the position and not with the people.
And I think the power needs of the person who's in that position has a lot to do with how that turns out too. And what they perceive power in that position to be.
No, agreed.
Anyway, we could talk about the Department of Education at another time. Okay. So, what are some of the effects of different styles of leadership on the community or interactions of teachers with each other?
So, I think the effect can be broken down, if it's okay with you, almost by different genres within what's happening in the building. I think the effect on staff is that the first two can have such a positive Pied Piper effect, because everybody, we relax, right? And we feel included and we feel valued, and it just makes it easier to come into work and say, yep, we're all here and we're all pushing this bus through the mud. And I'm exactly, I'm the least athletic person in the world, and that is a quote from A League of Their Own, and that is what a building is like. If you're not all pushing the bus through the mud, then it's noticed. It's noticed because that's one less person up against that bus. I think the third one, and I want to say this very pleasantly, but to the point. I think the third one can knowingly or more likely unknowingly cause massive damage, especially if that person isn't able to acknowledge their lack of knowledge. We're teachers, and it's ingrained in us to help. If you say, I don't get this, I need, and at the level that I teach, especially if a small person says, I don't understand, there's an instinct, I think, that kicks in for most of us that says, okay, let's look at this a different way.
You're in kindergarten. You don't have to yet.
Yes.
Let me see if I can find another way to explain it to you.
Exactly. And I would never want an administrator to feel like they were in kindergarten. But it's so much easier to work with somebody who's honest about, I know that I don't know this. Can you help? Or I had a question. Or how do we typically handle this when this comes up? That's so much easier. If we have to keep skirting egos to get through the day, it creates an environment of mistrust and possibly really dangerous apathy. What is the hook to keep you coming to work and pushing that bus? Yes. Right? If we could just stand there and watch this person try to rock the bus side to side instead, it doesn't work.
Well, for me, part of it is, I'm not going to say what I have to say about this because it doesn't make any difference if I say it or not. Mm-hmm. And so when you get to that place of it's not worth the effort because there is no listening ear here, it's a very contagious energy in a school. That apathy you're talking about.
No, absolutely. And I truly believe that just like the water that flows to the bubblers, that energy does in fact flow down the hallway. I think with the fourth, it goes back to what I said about the morphing and being able to start in one archetype and move through others. If that person comes in to save and genuinely becomes kind of a protective captain of the team within the building or the team within the department, everybody wants to work harder because they feel like somebody's on their side. A very close friend and someone I just trust implicitly as a professional who I've known as a teacher from kindergarten all the way up truly through the college level at this point, once said, you can do your job as an arts teacher as long as one of your administrators is in your corner. But if you end up in a position where there is nobody in that corner, your job becomes 10 times harder. And I think that's true.
I think that's a really wise thing to say, because having been in a situation where there was somebody in my corner and been in a situation where there was nobody in my corner, I would say that that's very true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the challenges are the same. The challenges with the kids are the same. The challenges with the energy level you need are the same. The challenges with kids passing in the hall are the same. But the difference is, part of it is, in one case, is part of a defeated cycle. And in the other case, it's part of a cycle where you feel like everyone's pushing the bus and not just you.
Yeah, No, and it's very, that I have not found that feeling or that concern to diminish. Being, you would think, right, 25 years in, like, oh, you know what, it's, I'm in the second half, I'm moving towards the last quarter of my career. That doesn't go away. And I think there's an intrinsic need for people who work in this business, which is not a business, but is treated like a business.
Yes, it is.
I think there is a real push for, no, I really want to work with supportive people. I really want to be part of a team. Nobody teaches in isolation. I mean, even if you have a terrible classroom that was once a storeroom and it's down in the basement by yourself, you don't spend your day in isolation. And you need that. In terms of the different archetypes, the effects on the kids, when I was in teacher training, an incredibly wise professor opined that children can smell bullshit a mile away. And I think the same thing is true when dealing with administrators. I think more than anything, when an administrator comes in and finds that wonderful balance of being in charge and genuine and human, I think the kids just subconsciously, they feel that. And I think that's when the kids really respond. And I'm not saying that that's the magic wand to help with behavioral challenges or anything.
There is no magic wand. Yeah, let's just go with that. But yes.
But if you can be that administrator who has a firm and human voice with the students when there is a behavioral challenge, and be the same person who, on lunch duty talks into the banana, right?
Yeah.
And I have one of those administrators right now.
Nice.
It's a very, in the best way possible. I do not mean to give the idea that all the kids should be out there pushing the bus. They're little, they don't need to push the bus. But it is the idea that they also feel seen, included, that school is a safe and warmer place because of that. And among the archetypes, again, if the position comes before the people, the kids know that, and I can see them. I think the same is true with teachers, to be fair.
I would agree.
You can see that they hold themselves at a distance. They are less interested in going along.
I would say the difference between, and I would agree, it's the same with teachers, except there isn't one teacher who can impact the environment of an entire school. But there are single administrators who can do that. And it's tricky that way because the archetypes matter more in some ways at the leadership level, just because they affect everybody.
Mm-hmm. No, they really do.
How about parents? Parent comfort, parent access. How have you seen that impacted, if at all, by the style of leadership?
I think, and I say this as a parent myself, I think that sometimes with the parents, people maintain that excellent bullshit detector.
Yes.
And I think sometimes it goes a little bit nose blind.
Yep.
As you get older. I think with the parents, it is a little bit easier to work with the third type, because I think as long as the right words are said and the presentation is positive and professional and put together, and many administrators in that archetype are put together and polished. I do not mean to indicate that they're all a walking mess.
Yes, I'm aware.
They are, I think in some ways that jibes better with parents who then feel possibly a little let down when they find out that what was being given to them was kind of a bag of goods.
Yeah.
And I think that's got to be a terrible tightrope to walk for an administrator, because you want to be polished and present and you want to have the answers for the parents, the guardians, the families. At the same time, you need a sense of humanity there too. And I think that's harder than with the kids and truly with the staff. We are used to making mistakes. It happens in every job. We are used to the kids making mistakes. That's half the learning process, right? That's half of your day, is keep trying until, you found the path, right? But with the parents, you don't have that sense of time. That's the impression I get watching administrators with family, and they need the right answer immediately.
Now.
And you have to put it all in one little package and push it across the desk. I have the answers, I know what I'm doing, I'm polished, I'm poised, and my humanity is second to being organized and in charge. I truly believe that any of the 4 archetypes of administrator can work well with families. I think what happens there is, can you back up what you did? Can you back up what you said? And can you balance it so no one pays a price? Can we refrain from throwing a family under the bus, because you don't want to do that.
Right.
You don't want to throw the student under the bus, but you also don't want to throw the staff member under the bus.
For me, the challenge with type D, the I'm here to save you, is that when problems that exist in schools are challenging to fix, if there was a simple solution, they would no longer be problems, And so when someone comes in and goes, I'm going to save you, right? The question of who's to blame when the saving doesn't work right away, that needle often points at parents. And I've seen administrators blame parents for the fact that their child, fill in the blank, can't control their ADHD, vandalize the bathroom, whatever it is. That's the challenge I see towards parents with type 4. And I've heard administrators say stuff to parents where I was like, are you out of your mind? What are you doing? But because when you have to fix something, somebody has to be to blame if it doesn't get fixed. And if you're lucky, they don't decide it's the teachers. Excuse me. Okay. If you could design your ideal administrator, now every teacher is different. Different people respond well to different types. As you were talking, I realized, I have been in situations, and I've also worked I was itinerant. I worked in a million schools. I know literally dozens of principals, well enough for them to know my name, for us to have chatted about, their kids or whatever. And I realized, I'm kind of most comfortable with type number 3, because with type number 3, they're really kicking hard to stay afloat often, and you can just stay beneath the surface if you want to. You can just let them swim on past you, And so that thing where they don't know enough to be a pain in my neck it appeals to me sometimes. Depends on the person, sometimes I want to be known, but there have been principals where I'm just as happy to be like, I don't really exist. I'm just an arts teacher, it doesn't matter what I do. And so I'm curious, for you, at the type of teacher you are, what is the ideal administrator? You don't have to choose from those 4 types,
from those 4 archetypes.
But just for you, what would be the ideal traits of an administrator?
Well, I think they should probably have a podcast. And if possible, perhaps they swear in the podcast.
I don't know what you're talking about. I have not said one fucking swear. Oh, no, that went wrong. You're the person who said, I listen to your podcast, but I can't do it at work.
Yes, I did say that. So I have to say, and I have to do a quick aside, because what you just said about the kicking and trying to stay on the surface, and you can lurk below and go on by. 1 year in my position, I was sent to a school that I don't normally teach in, and it was for literally 1 class. I breezed in, I breezed out, and it was fine. Yeah. I enjoyed the class very much. At the time, that administrator was, it was kind of an appointed interim.
Oh.
And
interim's tough.
It was very funny, because I thought, well, I'm not the base teacher here, so I probably won't have a lot of interaction. And I didn't, to the point that somewhere in January we had some snow, and I was delayed getting in. I made it for class, but not for the bell, essentially. And as I came through the lobby, that administrator was there, clearly making note of what staff were coming in delayed. and they went to say something, and I said, "Good morning," using their name, and floated on by. And I realized that the reason the administrator didn't say anything about my lateness was they didn't know who I was, and they didn't know my name or what I was doing there, and therefore, so you speak the truth, and it is
Under the radar, baby.
it is absolutely true. If I were truly trying to create, I don't know that I would even work within the archetypes. Truthfully,
Yeah, no.
I think. Honestly, right now, I feel a bit like the children of Mary Poppins trying to write an advertisement for their new nanny.
You can say it if you want to. Yeah.
I think I'd have to go with. I think it would be a combination of qualities. I think I'd be looking for a sense of realism. I'd like them to be real, but I'd like them to be realistic about what we're looking to do, what we're asking to have.
That's also very important to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
You already said this, so I'm just going to underline it. Teaching experience in some capacity. Please have had pupils in front of you of some level.
Yeah.
At some point. I think that human, it's not just be human, but also be a human. Understand. The industry, I alluded to this earlier. We're not a business. And every stakeholder involved in education, especially in public education right now, they're all people. They're not data sets. They're not machines. Whether it's staff being out sick or getting caught in traffic, like I mentioned, asking for help with a task, these are not failures or frailties on our part. These are people being people in the business of teaching people.
Yeah.
Be supportive. I mean, you can put your own spin on that. Your method of supportive might be kindness, right? I tend to think of humor as one of the supports I use because it really does go a long way. You could do something simple like cover a duty, a 20-minute arrival duty, but just let people around you know you're there for them.
Yes. And
part of your job as the leader is support, not point. You can't see me over the microphone, but I'm pointing a finger right now. That support goes a long way. And when you arrive, please take a beat and get to know the environment before you bring in some sweeping change.
Yes.
There may be sweeping change coming that is totally helpful. It may be totally not helpful, but it may be dictated by even further up the chain, right? Down the system. But don't come in and make change for change's sake because you can do that.
To establish your bona fide. This is what I know. We're going to change this because this is what I got the job on. It's like you don't know the environment or the people yet. You really need to get your feet planted in that. Not just a little, a soupçon. I understand. Like root yourself and figure out where you are. I feel that very strongly.
When I was in college, when I was getting my undergrad degree, my first year wasn't my favorite. And the saying at the time, right back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, was if the college you go back to as a sophomore is not the college you started in as a first year, even though they're the same college.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And I just feel like that's something I'd love any administrator to think about because
it's a nice way to frame it.
Yeah, if you take, and you don't have to take the whole school year and be afraid to suggest anything, but if you really take some concerted time and say, I really want to see how this ticks, district, school, program, doesn't matter, see how it ticks, and then say, I've noticed, or I had questions, because it may not be the most well-oiled machine, but something has been working because it's continued all this time.
That's right.
And I think within that, there's the idea for me to, and I know many people would look at this and say, I don't need that, but if you can be organized And if you can't be organized, because there's an incredible amount of leaders who are not organized and
really
wonderful leaders.
Good admin.
Yes,
a really
exactly.
Good admin.
Then please,
assistant.
Please just say, not my strength, but luckily I have the following people supporting my position who are.
Yeah.
And delegate that. Don't.
Yeah.
Just don't. It's okay not to be organized unless you are trying to pass yourself off as organized, and that's very difficult to work with.
It's because there are people in that school who are Wests, a compass point, exercise to personalities and work environments, who need to know the who, what, when, where, why, and how before they dive into a task. And if you are not somebody who needs that, you need to think about the fact that a bunch of people in there need that and respond to it. It's a short story. Detour, okay? When I first started teaching at Sparhawk, there were 2 teachers there who were Wests. They were the organizers. They were organized and organizers. And we used to do something on Fridays. Every Friday, we would all file into the community center with all 81 kids, grades kindergarten through 6th grade, and we would do some group project for the half day that had mixed age groups, right? And it was multiple intelligences teaching. So both of those teachers quit in the same year. I had been at the school for a couple of years at that point, and I felt bad. I liked them personally, but I really didn't think about it. And the first day of school, we're walking to the community building, and everybody looks at each other and says, okay, who made the groups? Who made the groups of kids? Because you had 2 kindergartners, 2 whatever. And everybody's looking at each other like, not me, not me, not me. And it was the most brutal, frankly, reminder of the fact that every personality type has an important place in a learning environment. It's not like you can do without the Souths, who are the emotional support people. You can't do without the Norths, who are the get it done now people. And you can't do without the East, who are the big idea people. But you really can't do it without the organized people, because it's a school. There are hundreds of people involved, sometimes thousands. It's always amazing to me that people act like, well, I'm like, no, well,
No, and if
critical.
you're not offended that I piggyback on that, I really I wouldn't want any administrator truly to ever come in and feel like they had to be a one-person band to be all 4 points of that compass, because I wouldn't want to be asked to be that as a teacher. And believe me, I work really well in 2 points of the compass, and I work passively well in 1, and the other one is a real struggle. So I'm always grateful when I'm in a group with faculty.
You're Northwest.
I am very much Northwest.
Yes.
And I can swing to the south when the wind changes.
Yep.
I'm not as much of an east as is needed, and I wouldn't ever want any leader, any boss, quote unquote, to be feeling like they had to do it all. You're not a one-person band, because there is no one-person band in a school setting.
That's right. And for me, that's part of the administrative trait that is critical, which is the idea that they can identify and honor the skills that other people bring. Not just as a kind of like, well, you can draw a cover for your science project if if you're done with the writing for extra credit, but actually viewing those people as critical components of the job that you have to do if you're the leader. It's not like, well, it's nice that they're it's critical that they're there. And I'm going to add one that's for me, which is one of the things I noticed about people who take on leadership roles is they come to believe that what they have to say is so much more important and interesting than what anybody else has to say. And if I could convey one thing, it would be, you know what? Everybody wants to say something and be heard. And people actually do not think that what you have to say is the most interesting, the most enlightened, I've seen it happen again and again to people who step into administrative roles, and there's no nice way to tell them. Though I have a couple of times.
No, agreed.
But I wasn't seen as nice. So,
Agreed.
Yeah.
I have been very fortunate because I have not run into that typically in a department head, in a principal or an assistant principal.
You're lucky.
I am lucky, and I know that because I have seen it in other areas, and I am never surprised when those individuals do not stay and typically move on because they've been offered the next important appointment.
Yes.
And oftentimes in cases where they will have a chance to say a lot of things a lot of time to a lot of people, and that's and good for you as you train future administrators of America in that role. I believe that I just by happenstance, I happen to have just finished on Friday the third part of a 3-part voluntary training, and they were all done after school, and it was a small group of us meeting this particular go round for this CPI refresh. Are you familiar with CPI?
No.
CPI is it's a really awesome program that helps with how do you effectively help a student or an individual re-regulate when they are struggling. And it goes from the very early stages of how to be supportive and how to be a listener, etc., all the way up through how do you protect them from harming themselves should things escalate.
Yep.
And an administrator in our system brought CPI to us, and I've taken it consistently because I find it useful, not just in my work life, but as a parent of children. So I'm finishing up the refresh, and what I was really struck by was this administrator has a genuine knack for making conversation. And that's part of what makes the training really robust for me, because there are conversations. And I don't just mean, does someone have an example? I mean genuine conversation about something that happened today, off campus, in your personal life, that somehow, and it just, you walk out feeling like you've made friends, that you weren't all there for a training. Yes. And I really think that's a wonderful example of how to be human and a human. Within that, you're talking about difficult subject matter, and yet everybody's at ease, because it's almost the training version of a salon that you are familiar with.
Well, it fosters trust in the group. Mm-hmm. If you can say something about yourself, it fosters trust, as opposed to, I want each of you to reveal something to me. Mm-hmm. Talk about the challenges you have in your classrooms. Forget it.
No.
Yeah, that's right. Because the chance of it being thrown back at you if the person is not trustworthy is substantial. And so people are very, very cautious. And this is something a nail I hammer on, is the importance of establishing trust in a classroom that you're in a community of teachers that you work with, in a school that you work in, and with parents, if you can. The parents it's harder. It's harder. They're afraid. That's what I learned as a principal. That when a parent comes to you in anger, it's because they're afraid. They're afraid that you're not meeting the needs of their child, or their child is not safe in the environment in which they don't have a choice about whether that kid is there unless they have enough money to send them to a private school. And so it's harder establishing trust with the parents, but you can do it if you work at it. But putting yourself out there first is critical. Mm-hmm. You can't go, tell me your worst parenting moment. Forget it.
No, yeah. and then especially because my children happen to have come home via adoption through the state. No, because what if you report that my worst parenting moment was when I completely lost my mind in the grocery store and started screaming? Like It needs to happen naturally. No one, and I suspect if you polled them, there would be a professional answer and a real answer. I don't know any administrator who loves holding meetings. I don't.
No.
And yet, I have found some really positive change in meetings over the years, where there are these moments of conversation encouraged, and it's not all conversation that you have to put yourself out there for. I just find it, I was going to say sweetens the pot, but it doesn't sweeten the pot. It warms the energy that we were talking about around the room, and I've been grateful for that, because even if it's someone who doesn't know all that they're supposed to know, that it opens we're all people having a conversation, and those moments add up.
Yes, that's a beautiful way to end this. I'm going to ask you the other question, but we may cut that part because I'm just curious. Would you ever want to be an administrator?
Okay.
The one I didn't tell you I would be asking.
That's all right. So I actually had the benefit working for a summer program over a number of years, where I worked first as a specialist and then in the role of an assistant administrator. And while it was a great option for the 3 weeks that I served in the program each summer, one of the things that I learned very quickly is, whether you personally like them as a staff member or not, the administrators are facing pressures that they are often shielding the teachers, the staff. It's not just teachers. It could be custodians, the people running the cafeteria.
It can be anyone.
Any staff member. And that was very eye-opening to me. And so it is not a reflection on the administrators I have worked with, but it's a reflection of that time. That's a resounding no. If I am walking a tightrope at certain moments as a teacher, not all day, every day, but if I am having tightrope moments, they are moments where they are balancing on a steel wire to keep all of these groups that we've talked about happy. And ultimately, if a parent and I have a disagreement about something, or one of us is looking to understand more about the other's perspective, it's the administrator who, that's the last stop in the line.
That's
right?
Yes.
And that, that's going to happen. And that's not a reflection on the teacher or the grown-up in the child's life. That is we are human, and sometimes, no, I'm so sorry, I was completely unaware that was happening. I'm so glad you brought it to my attention. But for every moment like that may hit me in a school year, I multiply that by the same number of people that I work. Oh my goodness, the moments that could go down that hallway. And for that reason alone, I can take my teacher hat off at certain points when the day is done, when the vacation week comes, when the summer arrives. I don't know many administrators who have that luxury beyond I'm not available because I'm doing this for 2 weeks, but that 2 weeks ends and you come back. And I just feel like that hat rests on the head far more often. So, no, thank you. I'm not sure if you were about to offer me a position. I politely declined.
No, I'm just curious because my thing, and I worked at a small private school, 81 students. How many students are there in the elementary school in which you work?
500.
Yeah. So, the metaphor I use is it's like trying to stomp out grass fires in your bare feet. And there's glass in the grass. And at the end of the day, if all the flames are out, even if there's embers and smoke, you can leave and go home. But you cannot leave until you've stomped it down to embers, because otherwise when you come back the next day, it's a forest fire. Mm-hmm. And the amount of time and energy that's required to be a leader of a school is no joke. It's no joke. So anyway, thank you for this interview. It was wonderful and rich and exactly what I thought it would be. And I really appreciate your coming and doing it.
Thank you. Thank you for the conversation and the humor.
Oh, it was a good time. I'm going to be talking with Amy Czarnowski Rawlins. For those of you who are dedicated listeners, you may recognize her from episode 6 when I interviewed her about behavior management stuff. But when we were talking about that podcast that we were going to do that interview, we ended up talking about the administrators in schools that she's worked in. And because that was an area of interest for me further down the line. I said, can we talk about that too? Because Amy's had a range of experiences with different types of administrators, and she talked about how it affected the classroom environment, the environment for the teachers, and every aspect of what happens between teachers and teachers, students and teachers in schools. And so I asked her if I could interview her about this, and that's why she's here for the second half of the previous interview. Here we go. You've worked in a number of different schools. You've worked in different areas of the country too, which I think makes a difference. And you talked with me before about the impact of administrative approaches on every aspect of school functioning. So can you talk for a minute about the most positive experiences you've had with school administrators and how it impacted your experience of teaching in the school?
So I would say my teaching experiences, I've been in 3 districts, and it's like a sandwich. The bread has been the good part. I mean, when is bread not the good part? But,
oh no, it's liverwurst.
Right. But I'll just start where I am now, in Tequila, which is in the Gwinnett County Public Schools, which is the largest school system in Georgia. And there was the former superintendent, who's no longer there. He has since retired. But his motto was, there are 2 types of people who receive paychecks in Gwinnett County: teachers and people who support teachers. And our school system, and it's in particular my school, because I haven't taught in any other schools in the county, really lean into that. And I saw that most vividly when in my first year at Tequila High School. Part of it, I think, because the experience leading up to me being hired was traumatic for the kids who graduated my first year had 6 theater teachers. So it was like a little, they were handling me with kid gloves, and they were like, we'll do whatever we need to do to make you stay because you are amazing. So my first year, that was kind of like, like the honeymoon phase. This is great. Like, anything I need, I would ask, I'm like, I really need some colored pencils, like next day on my desk, like just from Amazon. We got them. You need them? We got them. We'll find the money somewhere. And now I'm starting, the honeymoon has ended, but I'm still seeing that that feeling of support hasn't waned. And I do, I think my administration and I have only worked with them for this is my 4th year. They see the value in us as teachers, what we're able to bring to our classroom experience when we are appreciated. They do this fantastic thing, and I know it sounds so silly, but people are motivated by food. But one of the things that they do is is a monthly appreciation station, and every month our entire admin team, and we're a decent sized school, we have about 3,000 kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big school.
And so we have 1 principal and 7 assistant principals, but the entire administrative team parades around the school with one of those Rubbermaid roughneck carts with a theme. They've done, and they call it Appreciation Station, and they've done, like movie themes. When there's like a big fun movie premiere, they have a popcorn machine and movie candy, and they show up to your room with music really loud, and they call you, Miss Rawlins, come on out in the hallway, and they come get whatever you need, and they do it in front of the kids. So it's a little performative, but I think it's important for the kids to see that.
Yes.
And
what a good idea.
And they do it, sometimes it's not always food driven. I told you about in January, they usually do a school supply restock where they have a cart and it's just full of Post-its and Sharpies and Expo markers and anything you might have run out of by January. And that is just it seems like such a minor thing, but for them to invest the time and the money and the thought, there's just so much thought that goes into it. It just makes a world of difference. They do, during testing season, they do a stationary appreciation station because they really can't be walking through the halls with playing like Taylor Swift while kids are taking the district assessments. But it's still, they never neglect to do it. It's always, and it's just like, little things like that just...
I'm also struck by how playful that is.
Yes.
The January one, that's practical, that's a practical thing. But nobody needs movie popcorn and candy.
Yes.
It's playful, and I can imagine them thinking up the different things that they'll do and having a good time doing that. For me, that's part of it too. That's a gift to the administration who gets to play a little bit in a job that is otherwise often unrelentingly serious.
Yes, we did just another playful one that I think is so fun. Before spring break, they had one of those like Island Oasis frozen drink machines, but it was school-friendly frozen drinks. And they had like a limbo stick, and we all got those little floating drink holders that float in the pool, and they were playing like conga music. It was they're just fun and silly, and again, it's so when the kids see that too, they're like, wow, that they really love these teachers. Like, maybe I should really love this teacher a little bit more. There's a lot of the kids get it. It makes sense. It
also speaks to valuing the profession for the kids. The kids going, maybe I want to be a teacher one day.
Yes.
I want one of those little floating pool cup holders.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
It's great.
How about the experience? Well, we'll go good, bad, good.
Okay.
Let's talk about Decatur for a minute. Can you talk about the difference in that administrative approach and what impact you saw on it for your teaching, for the kids, for the faculty?
Sure. So when we chatted earlier, I mentioned this idea of there's great kids, great parents, and great administration. And having all three is incredibly rare. It's not unheard of, but it's pretty rare. Most people usually get two. Some people, will unfortunately only have one of those. It's, the magical unicorn of all three is true enlightenment as a teacher. But in Decatur, my kids were fantastic. I had great supportive parents who were sometimes maybe a little bit too involved, and that leads to my story about administration. I started there as a second theater teacher. I was a part-time teacher, and I was just teaching international baccalaureate theater, IB oral theater, and
I could talk about IB, but go ahead.
I did so many hours of IB training, and so that was my sole purpose for being hired to teach that, and it was great. But I was like, I am a musical theater person. I love teaching through song and dance, and so much adding those other elements to what I do. And the course teacher at the time and I were doing like an extracurricular musical, and the program was just like growing and growing, and we had so many kids who wanted to be involved, and we had all these kids who wanted to be, who were doing crew things and tech things, lights and sound and building sets and props and sewing costumes. Like 40 and 50 of those kids who were like, why can't we have a tech theater class? Why is there not a class for us? And I was like, that's a great question. And same with the musical theater kids. The kids performing were like, well, we would love for there to be a musical theater class. And so the parents were all like, yes, why can't we have a tech theater and a musical theater class? So I went to administration and I said, hey, listen, I've got all these kids doing this after school, and is there any way we could add a tech theater class and a musical theater class? And they were like, nope. No reason. No explanation. Just no.
Wow.
Okay, thanks. And so then the parents were like, well, what'd they say?
Suddenly those helicopters can work for you.
Yes.
Yep.
But here's the nasty part of this experience. So the parents then said, okay, well, we'll ask them, why can't we do this? This is about the kids. Isn't it about the kids? Isn't that why we're here? And the chorus teacher and myself got called to the central office and sat in the conference room in the superintendent's office with the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, our principal, our supervisor, and basically ripped a new one about not speaking to parents about what we're doing in the classroom or outside of the classroom. And that's when I was like, I should have left right then and there. There was no trust. There was no treating me like a professional. I felt like a child being scolded.
Yeah.
And it was put such a sour taste in my mouth that I'm like shaking thinking about how upsetting that was for me. I was just wanting to do something for my kids. I was advocating for a need that my kids had.
Yeah.
There was a way that we could service more kids in our school and provide them with something, a reason to come to school. And I was just told flat out, no, we can't do that. Wow. And then I got in trouble for it.
Yeah.
And so that type of culture it's toxic. I then started to resent everything that I was being told by administration or, not being trusted. And it became, I'm not going to go the extra mile. I'm not going to do anything extra. I'm just going to show up and I'm going to love on my kids and I'm going to do what I do really well. But I'm not,
building goes out the window.
Yes.
It's like, no.
It was a lesson in what not to do. Like how not to treat your teachers.
Wow.
And the fact that there were so many higher level administrators involved in that conversation.
Oh, it was a bullying thing. That's like you two little...
Yes.
Yeah, forget it.
And this might be worth noting. I was in Decatur for 9 years, at the high school for 9 years. I also taught at the middle school in Decatur too, because why not? But 9 years, I had 6 different principals and 3 different superintendents. So there was also a lack of consistency in the leadership in that district.
But the nature of it did not change. But the change.
Never.
I have a theory about, because I worked in a school in Lexington where it didn't matter how much turnover there was in the principal and the assistant principal. It was like the sort of sour nature of that school was built into it was carried in the bones of the school. Mm-hmm. With one faculty member who had been there across that time, it just replicated itself again and again. And at the other school, you did not have that. Mm-hmm. I have a whole theory about how difficult it is once that's established to move it, unless you literally were cleansing, we're going to have sage,
Yes.
Find a new job. We're saging the building.
Yeah, get it out.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it was there.
Well, I think you've covered the most negative experiences. Let's talk about the positive for one sec. Yeah. How did the positive administration impact the relationships between teachers? Because, we just talked about the culture of a school is carried in part by the people up here, and they believe that they control the culture of it. But part of it is carried in the relationship between the teachers. Can you talk about how the positive leadership impacted that relationship and how the negative leadership impacted that relationship?
So I think I could bring Chelsea back into this discussion with the leadership that I had in my final couple of years there.
Joe.
Yes, Joe. Just a great... I always said I would just follow him off the Tobin Bridge. If he was like, this way, I would go right after him. And I'm like getting emotional talking about it. But to know that he trusted me, he believed in me. And that permeates through the whole school. If the other teachers know that the administration trusts you and believes in you, then other teachers are going to trust you and believe in you. And as I also mentioned at the beginning, that's sort of we're all going through this together. We were in Chelsea, we were all experiencing the same tough kids. We were all, we were all experiencing these different situations, but knowing that we had somebody who had our back, no matter what, made a world of difference. It made us want to show up for him. It was that just, again, that mirroring the relationship with myself and my students. I never wanted to let Joe down, ever. Everything I did was in service to him in some way, how I want to make sure that he is proud of me. And I feel like a lot of my students have that same attitude towards me. Yeah. I don't want to let Ms. Rawlins down. I want her to know that I did my best.
Yep. It's really amazing how contagious it is.
Yes.
I'm curious, I don't know the answer to this, we didn't
Okay.
talk about it, but when you have negative leadership at the top, and now you have this thing where you've been called into the superintendent's office, and it's like, which makes everything that happens between you and your students higher stakes, because like, don't fuck up, because these not only do these people not have your back, they're like waiting for you to do this. Do you notice any difference in the way students interact with each other when that leadership at the top works from a negative, what I would call top-down oppressive type approach, as opposed to Joe, for example, who was extremely collaborative, who listened to what you said and said, I trust you, go do it, right? Do you notice any difference in student relationships? And the answer may be no, I don't know.
I'm not sure that I definitely noticed a difference in the relationships of my students in Decatur versus in Chelsea and Decula. But being able to identify the cause of that could perhaps be related to the leadership. It could also just be the kids' backgrounds, the where we were coming from, and their more reluctance to that community piece, that building community with them was a lot harder.
Why?
I feel like they were so silly, and I might be identifying it wrong, but if just off the top of my head, I feel like many of them felt like they were better than other people in that class, like that there was nothing in common, no matter how hard I tried to get them there. I was able to do it with some groups of kids, but I definitely feel like it was not as easy as it has been for me when I was in Chelsea and where I am now. And some of that could have to do with me too, and just my heart for a more urban kid, or
Yes.
The way I connect with those students versus the kids that I was working with there.
The Decatur kids were more privileged kids.
100%.
Is that correct?
Yes. I was
Yeah.
skirting around that, I guess. They are.
Well,
They were, yeah.
it's for me, the population that my heart is for the urban kids, is for the really challenged urban kids. And it just is. And it's the feeling that you talked about in the previous episode, which is that you go into an environment, you recognize, oh, this, right? So I do understand that. And I think that when you talk about privileged kids, they are a harder sell on things that, because they are so prepared to be at the top of the heap, to compete successfully, and then they're the ones who are going to be in the Ivy League school, or they're the ones who are going to succeed, and everybody else is a challenge to that, to their position. I think it's very, very hard, and it just depends on the parents, how the parents are about it. Whether you can actually chip through that iceberg of no, just individualism. Okay, what do you think is the most important aspect of the role administrators play in affecting school culture?
Trust.
Can you say more about that?
I feel like becoming a teacher is not an easy process. And it is, as we talked about in the previous episode, for those that stay, they have a reason to stay. And I feel like being trusted with that, that I am doing this because I really care about this. I want to say we're not in it for the money, and
or summers off.
Right.
I can't afford to take summers
Yes.
off. I teach over the summer. Yeah.
I'm here because I'm a professional, and I know what I'm doing, and I love what I'm doing. And working where I am now, I get reminded of that often. You're so great at what you do, Miss Rawlins. Like, I just love watching you teach. that is like, instead of being like, why weren't your objectives posted on the board? Why was so-and-so on their phone? Or, so-and-so was on their phone because their mom just got arrested last night and they're trying to figure out where they're going to stay tonight.
Yeah.
Like, there's no lack of trust. It's trusting that I am the expert in the room.
Yep.
And that is huge. Huge.
That's the perfect place to end.
Yay. Thank you. You're welcome.
You were great.
Thanks.
In the next episode, I continue the exploration of leadership in schools. In the meantime, if you have a story, good or bad, about school leaders you've experienced, please DM me in my Instagram account, educationclusterf_CK, or email it to me at educationclusterfck@gmail.com, and I'll share them in the next episode. I'll leave out your name if you'd rather. I did that. It's fine. As always, thank you for listening. If you have time, please post a review or share this with someone you think it would be useful for, and I'll talk at you in about 2 weeks on February 28th.
J like the letter, I'm making several waves. I know the mission is same. I made a splash, now all of my passes last like running a race with Usain. I keep it coming like this a buffet. And if I'm stumbling, I'm in the grave. Never gon' fumble it, I get the bag and I run with it, gunning it, gunning it, gunning it, gunning it.